Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. President Trump kicking off the briefing of the coronavirus with his coronavirus task force yesterday, saying this about the next 30 days after announcing the federal guidelines that were enforced for the last 15 days will be enforced for the next 30 on Sunday evening.
This is our shared patriotic duty. Challenging times are ahead for the next 30 days, and this is a very vital 30 days. We're sort of putting it all on the line. This 30 days, so important because we have to get back. But the more we dedicate ourselves today, the more quickly we will emerge on the other side of the crisis. And that's the time we're waiting for. The more we commit ourselves now, the sooner we can win the fight and return to our lives. And they will be great lives.
And it was interesting that he brought forward again a collection of CEOs from Honeywell, Procter & Gamble, United Tech, and, of course, our friend Mike Lindell from MyPillow. Oh, and Jockey, too, from Kenosha.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to talk Jockey, CEO Deborah Waller, talking about the isolation gowns and the scrubs that Jockey is providing. So it was great, and it was great to hear from those corporate leaders how they're repurposing the capacity they have to help with the personal protective equipment that's needed to be manufactured and then distributed without having to be forced to do it. Volunteering. There's no need to talk about nationalizing companies.
I know. And Mike Lindell, has 75% of his workforce right now working on medical masks. And he went off script a little last night.
God gave us grace on November 8, 2016 to change the course we were on. God had been taken out of our schools and lives. A nation had turned its back on God. And I encourage you to use this time at home to get back in the Word, read our Bibles, and spend time with our families. Our president gave us so much hope where just a few short months ago, we had the best economy, the lowest unemployment, and wages going up. It was amazing. With our great president, vice president, and this administration, and all the great people in this country praying daily, we will get through this and get back to a place that's stronger and safer than ever.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, Mike Lindell's story is a personal testament to what he offered at the Rose Garden yesterday. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by David Harsanyi, senior writer for National Review, author of First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun from the Revolution to Today. And it endures as an essential item, thanks to the Trump administration. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. Yes, it is an essential item. It's right there. The second thing they thought about to add onto the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. As Charlton Heston was wont to say during his time as head of the NRA, the second protects the first. And some of the others, too.
All of the others.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to get your reaction to the effort underway now to put blood on Trump's hands. That was the focus of the Sunday talk shows. And then to focus on the look back, we've got think pieces in Foreign Affairs magazine and other places talking about the time that was lost in February when there should have been all hands on deck for testing, and we lost a month after Trump shut down the border to China travel.
It's been the same way. It's obviously a different situation now, but it's been the same way for 4 years in the sense that, all these people do is make you defend Donald Trump even if you don't like him. Basically, they make fans out of people who wouldn't be, because there's no other way to deal with that kind of rhetoric that's so over the top. Yesterday, you had the MyPillow guy. Is that
Mike Lindell.
Yeah, Mike Lindell.
Right.
I want to call him Mr. Pillow. I don't know if that sounds just demeaning.
That's all right. He doesn't mind being called Mr. MyPillow.
That works.
Great story, seemingly wonderful man. He likes Trump, so what? And he's helping the country, and all you see online is sort of venomous tweets about how stupid he is, or how he's just using it to as a commercial, et cetera, et cetera. It's the kind of thing I think that creates a lot of Trump fans in this world. Anyway, so I guess that is my answer. I think it's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, and you wrote an article, which I just read, about America's response to coronavirus isn't the worst in the world. Who has it worse than us, and who's doing it better than us?
Well, I'm not an expert, but when you look at the way the fatality numbers per million, and you look at it in context, the reason I wrote that piece was that Paul Krugman went out there and said we are the worst. We respond the worst because of Donald Trump, and look at we have the most.
Right.
We're approaching the most deaths in the world. Obviously, we need to look at this per capita. Every death is a terrible thing, obviously, when it comes to this disease. But we look at it per capita. We look at recovery rates. We look at the way we treat patients. We don't believe China's numbers. At least I don't. And and it's also about testing. I'm sorry, he said the most tested, the most positively tested for coronavirus. Well, we have more effective tests. We test in a different way, a more humane way if we can. And obviously the tests are ramped up, and now we have more and more of them. So the number's obviously going to go up. It's just silly, and it's just a partisan. They do it to undermine Trump, which is fine. You want to be critical of his reaction initially. I think he should have taken it a bit more seriously, but who could really understand how this was going to, spread when China's lying about it and covering it up? I think it was a difficult spot for anyone.
Well, and also, too, just the historical context that's this sort of institutional knowledge that's completely absent from the D.C. press corps reporting. For example, nationalreview.com, your outlet, a piece by Colonel Randall Larson, retired Air Force, who also spent 15 years at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And he recounts, during the past several decades, many of my colleagues in the biosecurity and public health communities, plus a bipartisan group of political leaders, have argued to include public health as a key element in national security. Unfortunately, most national leaders fail to listen. I suspect that may be changing. He referenced specifically, at the national level, we must focus our efforts in the near term and long term on three key areas identified by Senators Bob Graham and Jim Talent. This is now almost a decade ago, on a report card in 2011, developing the capability to rapidly produce and deploy point-of-care diagnostics, developing the capability to rapidly produce vaccines and therapeutics, significantly increase surge capacity in our medical facilities. And John Solomon over justthenews.com and his people have gone back through decades of reports similar to this from a number of agencies. Point of fact is that both parties and multiple presidential administrations didn't do the long-term planning and the resource provision required from the recommendations of these reports from experts across the spectrum. And so Trump gets wind of this in the beginning of the year, and now what he didn't do in February is, it means this whole thing is his fault and there's blood on his hands.
Right. It's not like the CDC went ahead and fired everyone in 2016 and started all over again. And they should have institutional knowledge of how to, deal with this. And yet it seems to me they got in the way a bit, as did the FDA. But there's another thing here. I just don't think that a country like the United States or any country can be on war footing all the time, be completely prepared for every possible disaster that might befall us.
Right.
You have terrorism, you have natural disasters. If there was a tsunami tomorrow that hit New York, everyone would say, why didn't we build walls? Why weren't we prepared? There's some things you can't be fully prepared for all the time. That's just how I feel. And
yes.
I mean, perhaps we could have done a better job here. Obviously, you could always do a better job. But it's not as if any system or any country is really doing, people talk about South Korea and Japan, and there might be other reasons why they haven't been hit as hard, but I think we're doing as well as can be expected right now.
Well, one of the reasons too, and this has been pointed out by a number of public health experts who've had experience with epidemics and pandemics throughout the last couple of decades, say, well, one of the reasons is that Southeast Asia had an experience with SARS, for example, that they didn't forget. We didn't have that same experience, that we didn't get hit the way that they got hit. And so they were more sort of at the ready, more trained to say, this is what we do when something like this happens. So maybe they had a half a step advantage on us. But there's good reason for that. But again, this sort of endless, why didn't the Obama administration replace all the N95 masks that were used during the H1N1 outbreak, as was recommended by this agency and that agency? You really want to spend all your time talking about what Obama didn't do or what Trump didn't do in February when nobody predicted, or as you point out, in large measure, could have predicted just exactly how something like this would present and what would be required.
Right, and let's be honest. Every few years, maybe every 10 years, maybe less, there's some new disease virus coming out of Asia or somewhere else, and we're warned, and it never really manifests in this way with this kind of hit. And I think the people themselves, and we're responsible for ourselves as well in many ways that some people aren't, following guidelines and et cetera, is that we just didn't take it that as seriously as we should have, and people are going to die. But I don't know that you can again live. People die from many things all the time, and sometimes you just can't prepare for it.
And I wish that they would compare, we've had 70,000 people die so far this year from the flu. When they have all these updates, I wish that they would say, these are the numbers of people who died from the influenza A and B, and these are the people who died from complications of COVID-19. Do you think that we'll ever see that happening?
I hope that once it's over, we see a good breakdown of what this was about, and because obviously it just doesn't go away. We have vaccines, therapeutic cures, not really cures, but therapeutic things that we'll use. Maybe that miracle drug hydrochloroquine will work, but we'll see. Obviously, I think there'll be a breakdown. Someone will break it down, and we'll know. And yes, lots of people die from other things, and it's pretty scary. I think we put it out of our minds. We take risks every day. This, I think, is different only because you don't want to overwhelm hospitals, and you want to spread it out more because we just don't have the manpower to deal with it in certain places, like New York. Obviously, right now is struggling. So, I think that's why it's not just the death toll; it's just having all the patients show up at in one day or 1 week.
What about on the intertwined part of the health conversation, our economic health? And, the idea that we don't exactly have a handle on the public health side of this with respect to the data and the data we need to make models that have more predictive value. Well, do you think these same politicians know exactly the extent of the damage that's being done if you shut down the American economy for another 6 to 8 to 10 weeks?
No, I don't think economists have any predictive knowledge, as we see all the time. I think occasionally some of them get lucky and then we all, start listening to them. But I don't know. It's obviously a disaster for a lot of businesses and a lot of people. And I think that one of my pet peeves is people say, listen to the scientists or listen to the doctors and don't want us to listen to anyone else. It's a ridiculous way to approach this. We have to listen to other people as well because we, as I said, we take risks all the time. And I'm sure there are people out there who say to themselves, I've worked to build this business my whole life and it's going to be gone. It's worth the risk for me to try to save it. And this isn't a dictatorship, and maybe they should be able to save it. So I don't know what that time is. I'm not an expert on that, but I think you can't, I saw Virginia shut down until June 10th. I mean,
yes,
that's a pretty long time.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So I don't know. First of all, I don't think you're basically snatching hope away from people when you do that. Everyone jumped all over Trump for saying Easter. I heard it as aspirational when he said it.
So did
I wrote about it then. And
it gave me hope and let me sleep at night.
Yeah, they called it a deadline. He didn't say anything like that, nor does he have the power to make a deadline. And so anyway, I think that's an important conversation. I don't know how you roll it out. It's not like one day everyone's inside, the next day everyone's outside. I mean, there are places that aren't hit as hard, or there are kinds of businesses where people can work. I think we need to think about those things.
I just have to get your comment on this too. The story that out yesterday. After the Kennedy Center was the beneficiary of some log rolling, $25 million grant from the federal government as part of that CARES Act. The center's president told the National Symphony Orchestra Friday that they would receive their last paycheck. They wouldn't be paid until the venue reopens, and they would also lose their health care benefits at the end of May if the center remains closed. I'm sorry, why did we give them $25 million again?
No clue, and I don't think they deserve it any more than any other theater, than Carnegie Hall or whatever theaters in L.A. or Chicago. And I don't understand that. I think the whole stimulus bill was packaged wrong. I think that allowing Nancy Pelosi to try to dictate those things was a mistake. And these are, and there'll be fallout from this in the future as well. We're talking about trillions of dollars here.
And they're not passing on the money, the government money, to their people. It's fraudulent.
Yeah.
It's irresponsible.
Yeah.
He is David Harsanyi, senior writer for National Review, author of First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun from the Revolution to Today. Right today, like today, Tuesday. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you.
Oh, you're the best. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
At Fisher Investments, we do things differently, and other money managers don't understand why.
Because our way works great for us.
But it may